Welcome to Get the Facts, the program that provides you with accurate and timely information on government's policies and initiatives. I'm Theodore Henry. Now, as parents and students settle back into the school routine, many are observing that some students may function differently in terms of behavior and learning capabilities. It's important to recognize any challenges seen in these areas might not simply be a case of bad behavior. Instead, these differences could be indicative of neurodevelopmental disorders such as ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Now, identifying and understanding these conditions requires a thorough assessment. So, how can you discern whether your child might be experiencing such a disorder and what steps should be taken? Today, we're joined by Dr. Faith Alexander, Executive Director of Z Learning Center, who will shed light on the critical importance of early intervention in addressing neurodevelopmental disorders. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Alexander.
Thank you for having me.
Let's jump right into getting the facts. This is a fascinating subject, but first we have to start with a definition of what we're talking about. So we've used the word neurodevelopmental disorder. What is that?
So when we think about neurodevelopmental or neurodivergent, we think about disorders that have to do with the brain. There are several neurodevelopmental and or neurodivergent disorders that appear in kids.
Right.
When we think about, as you mentioned, ASD, ADHD, but then there are things like sensory processing disorders. There is cerebral palsy.
Right.
Epilepsy, or what we in Jamaica call as fits.
Yes.
Those are neurodivergent disorders. There are also other disorders such as other types of palsies and so on that make up or fall under the whole neurodivergent umbrella.
Oh, so we're talking in general atypical mental neural processes.
Yes.
Of social, emotional, developmental abilities.
Right.
Okay. Is being nonverbal one of those?
Absolutely. Being nonverbal, rather, is one of those. What we're finding now is a lot of kids who are on the autism spectrum tend to be nonverbal, especially those who are under 3 years. I'm finding a lot of those children are coming now to be assessed for profiles of being on the autism spectrum.
Right. So we're straying a little into the territory of science, but let's draw back from that just a bit, because we have mentioned ADHD, we've mentioned ASD, and I'd like you to give our viewers an idea of what that looks like and what that means.
So typically, a child who has ASD or autism spectrum disorder, they have a profile of repeated behavior. So you might see head banging, or you may see them doing what we call stimming, which is flapping of the hands, like that. Or they could be turning in circles repeatedly without even...
Compulsive behavior.
Yes, compulsive behaviors. Or you might find what we call excoriation, which is picking the skin until it bleeds, or so on. So all of those are signs of ASD.
Right.
I want to caution people, however, that just because they're seeing these signs today doesn't mean that the child is autistic. It has to be seen over a period of a prolonged, maybe over 6 months or so on.
Okay. So are these two developmental challenges, the ones that we're mentioning so far, are they prevalent in Jamaican society? If not, which are?
So in 2022, UNICEF did a survey and in Latin America and the Caribbean, and it found that 16 million children between the ages of 10 and 19 do have some sort of mental disorder.
16 million.
16 million between 10 and 19. Now, in Latin America and the Caribbean, Jamaica falls in as the 6th country. So we are high up there in terms of neurodevelopmental disorders. So that translates to about 1 in 7 children who has this disorder. Of course, a lot of it has gone undiagnosed in Jamaica.
Right. Why is that?
For the simple reason that Well, there are a number of reasons. Let me talk about why we're seeing this uptick, first of all.
Okay.
Science has evolved a lot over the years, And there are extenuating factors that are causing these disorders, such as environmental factors. When we think about lead, right, in the paint, in the crayons, and so on, that is helping to increase the prevalence of these disorders. Low birth rate, preterm babies, that's also another cause of these disorders as well. In terms of in Jamaica, a lot of, I don't think we have enough resources that are available to help with the diagnoses. So there are few practitioners like myself who are doing the assessments and the pre-screening to help parents to be aware of these disorders that need the early intervention.
Yes, yeah. So you mentioned that there's not enough equipment, and also I detected when you said that it takes time. It's not just a 2-day sort of assessment. So it does seem to be time and labor intensive. But also, you had mentioned that a lot of the times it's not diagnosed and detected. Now, that's from the diagnostician side. But is there an issue with that from the parent side? Is it taboo? You find, is it taboo among parents? Are they willing to face this?
So a lot of parents are in denial. In denial, yes.
Okay.
They may see the child doing what I mentioned before, the stimming, walking on the tippy toes,
right,
and they think that that is normal or something that they'll grow out of, or the spinning around in circles, or the jumping on the bed incessantly. Those are, some of them are sensory processing disorders, and most parents might think, because they're unaware, that it is just a normal behavior, but it really isn't. It is a precursor of and a sign of autism.
Right. So let's say a parent notices these things and it has gone on for some time and you're like, okay, this is definitely not normal. Let's say that they're not struggling with the taboo, they're not struggling with denial, they're actually willing to take this on. And I believe we should. Mm-hmm. What should they do? What's the first step?
First step is to get an assessment. So actually, what we do at Zeal is not jumping straight into an assessment.
Right.
We do what is called a pre-screening to ensure that we know whether we're looking for kids who may have a profile of autism spectrum, or a child who may have other developmental delays, or who may ADHD.
Okay.
Because the truth is, a full assessment is costly. So you want to ensure that you are on the right path in making a diagnosis before just, telling folks to spend an inordinate amount of money.
Right.
And you don't really know what you're looking for.
Indeed, indeed. Dr. Alexander, we're going to go to a small break right now. Please stay with us, because we're talking with the Executive Director of the Zeal Learning Center, Dr. Faith Alexander, about the importance of early intervention in cognitive developmental challenges. Please stay with us. We return after the break. Welcome back to Get the Facts. We're discussing neurodevelopmental disorders with Dr. Faith Alexander of the Zeal Learning Center, and she's shedding some light on the critical importance of early intervention. So, Dr. Alexander, let's pick up right there. Early intervention, what does that look like? Because some of our viewers might be listening and thinking, okay, autism is something that happens, right? ASD is something that happens. It goes for life. Does it matter when we detect it and when we don't? So early intervention.
Right. So early intervention should be, we look at early intervention from birth to 3 years.
Ah, okay.
So we want to ensure that we stem those developmental delays in that early period. So early intervention really refers to the supports that we provide for children. So whether it be be that they have, like we were talking about, the nonverbal child.
Right.
So they may need specialization in speech therapy. If they have fine motor or gross motor developmental delays, they may need work with an occupational therapist. So it is a group of I would say, a multi-dimensional group that comes together to work with this child to ensure that they can function in society.
Okay. And you mentioned from birth to 3.
Yes.
Would I be correct in interpreting that as the critical window of
Absolutely, yes.
So, Dr. Alexander, I have to ask, because somebody's thinking it, what if I miss that period?
We can still, even though that's a critical window, that does not mean or preclude a child from getting intervention if they are beyond 3 years old.
Okay.
It's just that birth to 3 is really the sweet spot of catching the children to ensure that they have a full academic and social life.
Right. So how do teachers treat with this in the classroom? How do you recommend teachers treat with developmental challenges like these?
Well, with teachers, it is really a specialization because teachers need certain special education, training to be able to adequately deal with these children. Once they are diagnosed and once they have been assessed, the diagnostician does provide recommendations to the classroom teacher and to parents as to how to treat these children.
Right.
So, for instance, if a child has an academic delay, it may be that, the diagnostician says, well, this child may need to work in a small group, or they may need additional time,
right.
or they may need a scribe to help them with the writing, or they may need someone who's a reader who's going to read the questions to them. So it all depends on what the child is diagnosed with, and then we make the recommendations based on that.
I like something that you said, and I'd like to highlight it. It's a specialization. I know we had a program once where we spoke about you can't just expect the average teacher without proper training to treat with these issues.
Right.
And I think sometimes people expect that, but really and truly you shouldn't. And you were speaking about getting information. So could you shed some more light on how teachers and support staff where and how they can get this sort of information, this sort of training and the updates in the field?
There are workshops that are available, and of course you have places like MICO and so on who do the specialized training for special educators and so on.
Right.
But there are organizations out there who actually provide this kind of training and sensitization for teachers to help them to be aware of what to look for and what kind of support they can provide for these kids.
Okay. And I have to ask about Zeal, of course.
Yes.
So, what strategies does Zeal Learning use to involve parents and the families and even concerned teachers?
Right. So what we have been doing is we've been doing some school pop-ups as well, and we've been working with teachers. In our school pop-ups, we actually go to Montego Bay, which we're going to next week, and schools in Montego Bay, because unfortunately, there are not a lot, as I mentioned before, resources available. So a group of schools will be coming together and we will be offering these evaluations to children and parents out there.
Right.
Theo, I must mention that every time what we need to do as a community is to involve parents, teachers,
all right,
and diagnosticians. It is not solely the responsibility of the school to ensure that every child gets an adequate and accessible education.
Right.
Parents have to advocate for their children. And importantly, once there's a diagnosis made and recommendations are made, again, parents need to advocate and see that these recommendations are being implemented.
Dr. Alexander, we're right in the tail end of this interview, and I hear the passion in the plea. There are parents watching. There are teachers watching, teachers who are parents themselves watching. And I'd like you to take the next few seconds to speak directly to them and make your case.
parents, teachers, it is important that you are aware of what a neurodivergent child is. Also, the importance of early intervention is key. All children can be successful. However, we need to put the adequate supports in place to ensure that they are socially and academically suited for their later life.
And that is the final word on bringing our children to the future. All children can learn. We used to say in Jamaica, every child can learn and every child must
learn.
And at the Zeal Learning Center, Dr. Alexander, you believe that despite the atypical challenges that the children may be having.
Absolutely. We've had great success with our children who have come to the center. And, you know, it is something that I am very passionate about, in that children I know can be successful.
Indeed, indeed. This has been Get the Facts. Our guest was Executive Director of Zeal Learning Center, Dr. Faith Alexander. Thank you for watching and for acting on the information Dr. Alexander presented. And until next time, I'm Theodore Henry. Take good care.